Imagine standing where the world ends, where the last line of land sinks into the endless sea, and the sea itself dissolves into the sky. There are no birds, no voices, only the hiss of wind over stone and the crimson glow of a dying sun bleeding across the water. And there, in that silence between heaven and earth, a solitary figure kneels. His shoulders tremble like mountains breathing. His arms curve upward, muscles straining to the edge of tearing. He does not look up. He does not cry out. Upon his back rests not a mountain, not the earth, but the heavens themselves. This is Atlas, a name that has survived the ruin of time, reshaped into a symbol of burden, endurance, and punishment. Yet what almost everyone believes about him is wrong. Atlas never carried the earth. The Greeks never said so. They told, instead of a titan condemned to hold apart the heavens and the earth, to bear the dome of the sky so that creation itself would not collapse. That mistake, that simple shift from sky to world, built an empire of symbols. From Roman mosaics to Renaissance marble, artists replaced the vault of heaven with a globe. It was powerful, poetic, and false. And in that falsehood, Atlas became more than myth. He became metaphor, not just a punished god, but the very image of humanity's struggle beneath the weight of its own making. Before the sentence that chained him to eternity, Atlas was part of a family that defined rebellion, intelligence, and the human condition. In the bloodline of Iapetus and Clymene ran both divine might and mortal fragility. The Greeks often explained the world through families. For them, genealogy was philosophy. Iapetus, the father, was not a mere titan. He embodied mortality, limitation, the wound that separates men from gods. His consort, Clymene, daughter of the ocean, represented grace, compassion, the gentleness that tempers pain. From them came 4 sons, 4 reflections of the human soul. Prometheus, the forethinker, symbolized wisdom and foresight, the daring intellect that steals fire from the heavens. Epimetheus, the afterthinker, embodied folly, the kind that opens Pandora's jar and releases sorrow into the world. Menecius, the violent and arrogant, became destruction itself, smitten by Zeus's thunder for his pride. And Atlas, the strongest of them all, was not defined by cleverness, nor arrogance, nor error, but by endurance, the unyielding capacity to bear what others cannot. Together, they formed a map of mankind, thought, error, rage, and resilience. If Prometheus gave humanity fire, Atlas taught them what to do after the fire burned, how to stand, how to hold fast, even when the sky itself presses down. In every tale, Atlas remains silent. While Prometheus argues, bargains, and defies, Atlas simply endures. No dialogue, no prayer. He is presence incarnate. His beauty is not in grace, but in function. Muscle turned to monument, motion turned to stillness. He has no throne, no crown, no armor of gold, only the carved austerity of a body built to hold eternity. Ancient poets described him with brutal simplicity. Atlas stands at the edge of the world, bearing the heavens upon his shoulders, nothing more, because nothing more was needed. The image itself carried the entire tragedy of existence. He was the border between realms, between the infinite above and the finite below. If Atlas fell, the universe would collapse with him. Through centuries, that image never faded, though it changed form. Roman sculptors gave him weight. Renaissance painters gave him sorrow. They replaced the stars with countenance, the sky with the earth. Atlas, once the divider of realms, became the bearer of the world. And though the myth was rewritten, the symbol grew stronger. The mistake became truth in art, and art in time became belief. Today, when we say his name, we no longer think of the heavens. We imagine the weary giant bent beneath a sphere, his knees trembling under oceans and countenance. Yet in that error lies something deeply human, for who among us has not felt, even once, as Atlas did, carrying too much, too long, with no rest and no release? That is the secret reason his image endures. Atlas is not merely a god from forgotten Greece. He is every soul that endures what cannot be escaped, the body that strains, the will that refuses to break. And there, on that desolate western shore where the sun drowns each night, a single question lingers in the air, soft as thunder on the horizon. If Atlas does not hold the earth, what then does he truly hold? Is it the sky or something far greater, the fragile order of existence itself, forever trembling on his back? Before the weight of the heavens was forced upon his shoulders, Atlas had already inherited a burden, one written not in punishment, but in blood. The line of Iapetus was a family of rebellion, a mirror held up to the gods themselves. From their first breath, they were destined to challenge Olympus, to test the boundary between divine will and the human spirit that would later echo it. Atlas was the eldest of his brothers, born from the union of Iapetus, the titan of mortality and human limitation, and Clymene, the sea's daughter, whose nature was patience and renewal. In their union, the Greeks saw the origin of conflict, the frailty of flesh bound to the vastness of spirit. It was through them that the four sons of Iapetus came to embody the story of mankind long before man existed. Prometheus' foresight and intellect, who shaped men from clay and stole fire from Olympus. Epimetheus' afterthought and innocence, who opened Pandora's jar and let suffering into the world. Meneseus, pride and destruction, struck down by Zeus for his arrogance. Atlas, endurance and defiance, the one who did not burn, who did not beg, who simply endured. Each brother reflected a piece of the human condition, cunning, folly, rage, and endurance. But among them, Atlas was unique, not for his rebellion, but for the nature of his strength. While the others sought to act, Atlas existed to endure. His resistance was not a cry against the gods. It was the refusal to collapse under what could not be changed, and that was precisely why he was chosen. When the heavens and the earth still trembled from the birth of the cosmos, the Titanomachy erupted, the great war between the elder Titans and the rising Olympians. It was not a battle of armies, but of forces older than time, mountain against lightning, stone against storm. The Titans fought to preserve an age where chaos was strength. The Olympians, led by Zeus, fought to establish a new order. Atlas stood among the mightiest of the Titans, his form towering even among gods, while Prometheus, ever the strategist, foresaw Zeus's victory and abstained from the fight. Atlas joined the front lines with the fury of a living mountain. For 10 years, the earth quaked beneath their war. Mountains shattered, oceans boiled, and even the stars seemed to dim as heaven and earth collided. But Zeus had allies the Titans could not withstand. The Cyclopes forged weapons of unimaginable power, the thunderbolt for Zeus, the trident for Poseidon, and the helm of darkness for Hades. The Hecatoncheires, the 100-handed giants, rose again from Tartarus to crush the rebellion. The Titans fell one by one, their roars swallowed by the endless storm of divine retribution. When the war ended, Zeus cast his enemies down into Tartarus, a chasm deeper than death, guarded by an ending night, but he saved one punishment for last. Atlas, Zeus saw in him not just rebellion, but a strength too dangerous to destroy. To erase Atlas would be to erase one of the pillars that kept the universe itself from collapsing. And so Zeus created a punishment unlike any other, a sentence that would never end, yet without which creation could not survive. He placed Atlas at the farthest western edge of the world, where sky and sea meet the very boundary between the known and the unknowable. There, Atlas was forced to kneel, his shoulders wedged beneath the celestial vault. He was not cast into shadow like the others. He was made visible, a monument of suffering that even gods could see. From that moment on, Atlas was both prisoner and pillar, his agony the foundation of order, his endurance the proof that rebellion had meaning only when it could bear the weight of consequence. His strength became necessity, his punishment became law. And yet, in this cruel symmetry, there was something almost divine. For in binding Atlas to the heavens, Zeus also bound the heavens to Atlas. Every dawn, every sunset, every star that rose across the night, all of them passed across the curve of his shoulders. The constellations that once floated freely were now painted upon his pain. The Greeks, who saw stories written in the stars, looked up each night and saw in those shifting lights the echo of his endurance. To them, Atlas was not merely a titan chained by the gods. He was the living axis of the cosmos, the point around which heaven turned. His agony was not pointless, it was purpose itself. This is the paradox at the heart of Atlas, a punishment that sustains creation, a curse that becomes cosmic order. He is both defiance and obedience, rebellion and structure, chaos turned into stability. It was said that even the gods would sometimes glance toward the western horizon and fall silent, not out of pity, but out of recognition. They saw in Atlas what they could never become, the eternal act of holding on, for what is divinity, if not the ability to endure forever? Travel now, in your mind, to the farthest edge of the ancient world, the realm the Greeks called the Ashata, the uttermost west. To them, this was no ordinary horizon. It was a liminal border where the light of Apollo's chariots sank into the ocean each night, and where mortal maps could go no further. Beyond this point lay mystery, death, and the unknowable. And there, at the last breath of the world, Atlas stood. The poets said he lived at the pillars of heaven, a region where the sky's weight bent the mountains themselves. He was not hidden away like the Titans imprisoned in Tartarus. His punishment was meant to be seen, a reminder to gods and men alike of the price of rebellion. Yet as the centuries turned, myth began to twist around him. Some storytellers saw not a captive, but a king, a ruler of this liminal land between worlds. In those versions, Atlas was sovereign of the far west, the keeper of knowledge, the guardian of sacred fruit, and the father of daughters who shimmered like sunlight through leaves. His realm was said to house the garden of the Hesperides, an orchard glowing with apples of immortality. There, at the edge of the setting sun, the Hesperides, his daughters, tended trees heavy with golden fruit, while a coiled serpent named Ladon guarded the branches from mortal hands. The story of Atlas began to shift, not from punishment to redemption, but from tragedy to majesty. He was no longer merely the Titan who held the sky. He was the border itself, the meeting of heaven and earth, of death and immortality, of prison and paradise. The West, for the Greeks, was never just a direction. It was the direction of endings, of descent into the underworld, of fading light. To rule the West was to preside over the mystery of dying and to guard what could never belong to mortals. But even paradise is visited by heroes. After slaying the Gorgon Medusa, Perseus wandered the world, carrying her severed head, a trophy both wondrous and terrible, whose gaze could still turn all living things to stone. His journey took him across deserts and seas, until he reached the distant land of Atlas. Exhausted, he sought shelter beneath the Titan's mountain-shadowed realm, invoking the sacred law of Xenia, the bond between guest and host. But Atlas, bound by prophecy and fear, refused him. Long ago, it had been foretold that a son of Zeus would one day steal the golden apples of the Hesperides, and Perseus, born of Zeus, fit that prophecy all too well. The Titan, whether out of caution or arrogance, denied him refuge. There are two endings to what followed, and the Greeks told both with equal weight. In the first, Perseus, angered by insult, revealed the head of Medusa. The moment her stony gaze met Atlas's eyes, the Titan's vast form froze. His muscles stiffened, his skin hardened, and his body became indistinguishable from the crags around him. His beard turned to stone, his arms to peaks, his shoulders to cliffs. Thus, the Atlas Mountains of North Africa were born, a petrified god holding up the sky, silent for eternity. In the second version, softer and more sorrowful, Atlas asked for the Gorgon's gaze. Weary of his endless burden, he begged Perseus for release. The hero, out of compassion, granted it. The transformation was mercy, not vengeance. The Titan became the mountains by choice, his body no longer straining beneath the heavens, but fused into the earth he had once separated from the sky. In both tales, his suffering was etched into geography itself. The Greeks saw the peaks of the Atlas range, distant, immovable, rising into clouds as the stone skeleton of the Titan's defiance. Even in death or freedom, he continued his labor. The mountains were his monument, his tomb, and his eternal posture. And so, the myth of Atlas expanded once again. From Titan to prisoner, from prisoner to king, from king to mountain. Each layer added to his paradox, cursed yet divine, broken yet indispensable. But if Perseus's arrival turned Atlas into stone, there was another who would test his burden itself. Another son of Zeus, whose name burned brighter than most. Heracles, the slayer of beasts, the breaker of chains, the man whose strength rivaled even the Titans. His journey would cross paths with Atlas in a test, not of might, but of trust and cunning. Yet before we step into that meeting, let us pause. For even in myth, stories need breath, and so does the audience. You've heard of Atlas, the prisoner, the king, the mountain, but have you heard of the mysteries he left behind? Ancient symbols scattered across our world, from Morocco's peaks to the night sky itself, whispering of a hidden connection between the heavens and the earth. If your curiosity has already begun to stir, there's a place where those hidden stories unfold in full, a quiet archive of the uncanny, of the truths history dared not keep. It's called Index Unknown, a space where forgotten chronicles are revived and the impossible is re-examined. We'll return to Atlas in a moment, but first remember that name, because, just like the Titan, some mysteries hold up the very sky of our understanding. Now, let's go back to the edge of the world where Heracles waits. The story resumes beneath a sky that trembles with ancient light. Heracles, son of Zeus, had come to the edge of the world, a place few mortals dared to imagine, much less reach. The ocean at his feet boiled with sunset, and before him loomed the Titan who held the sky. Atlas's silhouette rose like a continent made of flesh and despair, his skin streaked with starlight, his breath a slow wind that could move clouds. Heracles had come for one reason, the 11th labor, to retrieve the golden apples of the Hesperides, the same apples guarded by Atlas' own daughters in their shining garden at the farthest west. Few mortals even knew where the garden lay, and fewer still could hope to survive its perils. The trees bore fruit of immortality, and the serpent-laden never slept. But Atlas knew this place as no other could. When Heracles arrived, he did not come with arrogance. He came with purpose, the quiet, measured determination of one who had faced monsters and gods alike. He looked upon Atlas, pity and awe, woven into the same breath. "Titan," he said, "I seek the golden fruit that your daughters guard. I cannot reach them, but you can." The air trembled. Atlas, who had not spoken to another being in an age, turned his vast head, a slow movement like tectonic plates grinding together. His voice, when it came, was the groan of stone under strain. "You would take what belongs to the gods," he said. "I would complete what fate demands," Heracles replied. And for the first time in eternity, Atlas laughed, a hollow, cracking sound, heavy with irony. Then Heracles made his offer. If Atlas would fetch the apples, he would take the Titan's burden for a moment. The idea was madness. Even gods trembled beneath such weight, and Heracles was mortal. But strength to Heracles was not merely muscle, it was will. Slowly, Atlas bent. His knees sank into the earth. The sky's weight shifted, thunder rolling as if the stars themselves resisted change. Heracles braced himself, dug his feet into the soil, and raised his shoulders, and the heavens came down upon him. It was not simply pressure, it was existence itself, pressing into his bones, into the fibers of his being. His vision blurred, the light of the cosmos burned behind his eyes. He felt the pulse of stars, the hum of creation, the cold breath of the void. For a moment, he was both man and Axis, a second Atlas standing between realms. Atlas rose, unburdened for the first time since the dawn of the Olympians. The Titan straightened, stretching his arms as if rediscovering what freedom felt like. He gazed upward, not at the sky, but at the empty space where his agony had been. For the first time in uncounted ages, the universe was light upon his shoulders. He walked. Across the horizon he strode, vast and graceful, until he reached the garden of the Hesperides. His daughters, radiant as dusk itself, greeted him not with fear, but with tears, for they had not seen their father free since the birth of their world. He reached up, plucked 3 golden apples, and held them in his hands. Their glow reflected on his face, and in that light, something almost human flickered in his eyes. When Atlas returned to Heracles, he carried more than fruit. He carried temptation. "Here," said the Titan, holding out the apples. "But listen, son of Zeus, I have borne this weight since your father claimed the sky as his own. I will take these apples to Eurystheus myself. You stay here. Hold the heavens as I once did." Heracles, straining beneath the sky, nodded slowly. "Very well," he said, his voice taut. "But before you go, take it back for a moment. I must place a cushion upon my shoulders to bear it more easily." Atlas agreed. The sky tilted once more, and with a groan that split the horizon, he lifted the heavens back onto his shoulders. In that instant, Heracles took the apples and stepped away. When Atlas looked up, the hero was already gone, his figure vanishing into the shimmer of the horizon. The Titan roared, a sound that shook mountains, but there was no one left to hear it. His brief taste of freedom dissolved like mist. The weight of eternity settled once more upon him, heavier for having been lifted. The Greeks never spoke of Atlas's rage after that moment. They did not have to. His silence said enough. In Heracles' cunning, the human mind had outwitted titanic strength. It was not cruelty, it was inevitability. For no matter how vast his power, Atlas was still part of a cosmic equation that could not be broken. He must carry the sky. And yet, in that fleeting instant when his shoulders were unburdened, Atlas glimpsed something he had never known, the lightness of being, the dream of release. It did not last, but it left a scar deeper than any chain. From then on, he no longer bore the heavens merely out of punishment, but out of memory. To let go again would mean remembering what he had lost. That is the tragedy of Atlas. Not eternal suffering, but eternal remembrance of a moment without it. In myths, he would forever be the Titan who held up the sky. Yet, in that small exchange, he became something greater, a symbol of choice, of defiance, softened by longing. Heracles continued his journey, carrying the golden apples that gleamed like miniature suns. But even he could not have known that his cunning would turn Atlas into something almost human. When mortals looked up at the stars, they no longer saw just constellations. They saw the slow rise and fall of Atlas's breath, the endless endurance of a being who once dreamed of setting the world down and never could. And so, in the silence after the hero's departure, the Titan resumed his vigil. The stars turned once more across his shoulders. The world went on. When centuries passed and the fires of Olympus cooled into myth, the memory of Atlas did not fade, it transformed. The Greeks began to look up at the sky he held, tracing lines between stars, as though reading verses from an ancient poem. There, scattered across the heavens, they saw his family shining. The Pleiades, his 7 daughters, glittered like delicate embers near the shoulder of Taurus. The Hyades, their weeping sisters, marked the season of rain. Each light a fragment of the Titan's legacy, proof that even punishment can seed eternity. But to the poets of later ages, Atlas was more than endurance. He was the first astronomer, the Titan who not only bore the heavens, but studied them. They imagined him not as a brute force to labor, but as a thinker, one who memorized the stars that pressed against his skin. Diodorus Siculus, writing in the 1st century BCE, described Atlas as the father of celestial knowledge, the first to map the constellations and teach mankind the art of reading the sky. If he carried the dome of heaven, they reasoned, who else could know its every turn more intimately? His punishment became perspective, his agony, understanding. And so, myth folded into philosophy. Atlas was no longer the condemned. He became the architect of cosmic order. The stars were his notes, the planets his compass. Humanity, forever looking upward, followed his example, searching for meaning in the spinning lights above, charting navigation by the very constellations his body supported. It is here that Atlas crosses a line few mythic figures ever do. He ceases to be only a god and becomes a metaphor for the human condition itself. Every generation, in its own way, recreates Atlas, the thinker crushed by the weight of what he knows, the scientist who bears the responsibility of discovery, the dreamer who carries a world of expectation, the soul who upholds order even when it hurts to stand. Yet history is rarely kind to truth. Over the centuries, something in the myth changed again. In the earliest writings, Hesiod, Pindar, Apollodorus, Atlas held the heavens, the sky, not the earth. The Greek word Uranus leaves no doubt. But as Roman art bloomed and later Renaissance painters sought more dramatic imagery, the sky transformed into a sphere, and that sphere into the earth itself. Atlas was redrawn, not as a pillar dividing realms, but as a weary giant carrying the world. It was a mistake, simple, visual, and irresistible, because the image of a man holding the globe is something the human eye cannot forget, and so the error survived. Sculptors carved it into marble, scholars copied it into manuscripts, and map makers adopted it as emblem. Eventually, entire collections of maps came to be called atlases, as if the weary Titaness shoulders were broad enough to bear every coastline, every mountain, every known land. The myth had been rewritten by the very hands that sought to honor it. The heavens were forgotten, the earth took their place. Yet even that distortion holds a strange truth. For to carry the world, metaphorically, is exactly what Atlas had done all along. His body stood between sky and soil. His suffering ensured the survival of both. And perhaps that's why the world still needs him. Not as a figure of despair, but as a symbol of resilience made sacred. In the end, Atlas became more than myth, more than marble. He became an archetype. Every culture, in some form, carries his silhouette, the being who bears the impossible weight so that others may live beneath it. In the east, the cosmic tortoise upholds the heavens. In the north, Emir's skull becomes the sky. All are echoes of the same truth, that existence itself demands endurance. So what, then, does Atlas truly hold? Not the earth, not merely the heavens. He holds the fragile space between them, the balance that keeps chaos from returning, the thin, invisible line where order and freedom meet. Look up tonight. The stars you see are still his burden, the constellations, his scars, the slow turning of the night sky, his eternal breath. Every second that the heavens remain above us, Atlas still stands, unseen but unbroken. He was cursed, yes, but curses are only the other face of necessity. Without Atlas, the sky would fall, the seas would rise, and creation would fold in upon itself. The weight he carries is the price of harmony, a price someone, somewhere, must always pay. And so, at the end of all stories, he remains at the western edge of the world, beneath a sky that no longer crushes but hums like a memory. His silhouette carved into the horizon, his silence deeper than oceans. He no longer asks for release, because he has become the act of holding itself, a quiet defiance against collapse. A reminder that endurance, when carried long enough, becomes grace. The sun will sink, the constellations will shift, the world will sleep. But somewhere, in the hush between the stars, the Titan still breathes, and the heavens do not fall.